Hi, in this video I'll be showing you how to knit with two strands of yarn together. I'll be using 15mm needles. You might use these straight ones or you may use circular needles. It both works in the same way. And I'll be using two balls in two different colours of the squishy one chenille yarn. I've decided to use two colours so that you can really clearly see when we're knitting with two strands, the two different strands that we're using. So let's get started. The first thing you'll need to do is just unwind enough yarn to get going with. In your colours, you can obviously use two different colours or you might use two of the same colours. And for the duration of the project, we're going to treat the two strands as if they were one strand of yarn. So everything you do, you basically just pretend that this is one strand of yarn. So let's get started. Now the first thing you'll need to do is tie a slip knot. So wrap the yarn around your hand like this. So you've got a loop, and then we're going to thread that yarn through the loop and pull it tight, holding all the ends like that. I'll do that again. So you can just pull that apart and it slips out like that. So take the two strands of yarn, wrap it around your hand like this. So you've got a loop, and then we're going to just pull the strands through that loop, keeping hold of all the ends until you have a knot like this. You can then thread that onto your needle and pull the longer yarn that's attached to your ball until it's tight. You want it tight enough so that it doesn't fall off your needle when you turn the needle upside down, but so that you can still move it up and down your needle like this. So you want to make sure that you don't knit the short end in, so try and keep that out the way if you can, and we're going to start casting on. So typically you'll have your needle with the stitch on in your left hand and the empty needle in your right hand. If you are left-handed, you may prefer to do it the other way around. So first of all, we're going to thread our right needle through that first stitch and cross over like this. So this is what it will look like from the top, and this is from the front. You want to make sure that your right needle is behind your left needle. And we're going to then hold both the needles with the one hand, so that frees up our right hand to manage the yarn. Now, treating these two strands as if they were one strand, we're going to go anti-clockwise around the back and back down through the middle. I'll do that again. So you go anti-clockwise around the back, down through the middle between the two needles. So this is what we look like from above. This is the yarn you've just pulled through, and this is from the front. Now, keeping some tension, keep your little finger and your second finger, just hold the yarn so it's a little bit taut. You can regain control of the needles in your relevant hands. Now what we want to do is pull this yarn here through this stitch here. So to do that, you ever so slowly pivot and angle that needle down until you're able to pull it through that stitch. See, like that. Then pull that towards you slightly, not too much. Straighten up, and then you want to loop and transfer that stitch onto your left needle and remove the right needle. You can then tighten up. So we'll do that again. Now you always want to make sure you're going into the nearest stitch to the point here, and make sure you're catching both strands of yarn at the same time. So we're going in up next to the needle and cross over with the right needle behind the left needle. And we're going to take our long strands, make sure you keep those short ones out the way so they don't get mixed up. Take our long strands, holding both needles with the same hand, go around the back, and down through the middle. So this is what it looks like from above, and this is in front. Now you can regain your control of the needles with both hands, keep a little bit of tension on that yarn, and we're going to slowly pivot and pull down our right needle, making sure that we catch that yarn, pulling it through the stitch, Then you can pull that needle towards you, straighten up, and then you want to loop that onto your left needle and pulling out your right needle. I'll do that one more time, and then I'll go at a slightly more like normal speed. So you want to go into the last stitch on your needle, the one closest to the point, the right needle behind the left needle, and cross them over. Hold both needles with your left hand, and with your right hand take the yarn anti-clockwise and down through the middle between the two needles. Regain control of the needles in both hands, keeping some tension on the yarn. Slowly pull down and pivot your right needle to catch the yarn through the stitch. Pull that towards you, straighten up, and then hook it over the top of your left needle, removing the right needle and pulling the yarn. When you pull the yarn, you don't need to pull it really tight. Again, you need to be able to move these stitches up and down the needle, but you don't want them to fall off. So not too tight, not too loose, just right. So I'll do that a few more times at a more regular speed. Don't forget you can slow these videos down to 1/4 of the speed if you want to see a slightly slower version, or if you want to pause it and rewind at a certain point, you can. So up through the last stitch, around the back anti-clockwise, and then pull the yarn through the stitch. And you can push your stitches slightly further down the needle as you go. The chenille yarn has quite a good grip on these wooden needles, so it makes it a little bit easier when you're learning. There's less risk of the yarn flying off. So I've cast on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches. Let's do one more so it's a nice even number. There you go. So 10 stitches on the needle. So because I've used 2 different colours, it's easier to see each stitch. So this, for example, is 1 stitch, even though there's 2 bits of yarn. So it's important to remember when you're knitting with 2 strands that each stitch is going to have 2 strands of yarn. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So because you have got 2 strands of yarn, make sure you're taking your time to properly count your stitches and that it's matching up with your pattern. Next, we'll be going through how to knit stitch with 2 strands. So with your cast on stitches, you want to take your right needle and again go into the very first stitch on your left needle. The right needle should be behind the left needle and crossed over. Then take your yarn strands, wrap them around the back anti-clockwise and down through the middle. So this, up to this point, is all the same as casting on. Now this is where things start to get slightly different and you need to remind yourself you're not casting on anymore. So you still pivot your right needle and pull it down to catch that yarn. Instead of pulling that loop towards you though, you're actually going to pull this whole stitch, both parts, off the left needle, like that. So you transferred 1 stitch from your left needle to your right needle. And we're going to do that again for all of these stitches. So go in through that first stitch like this, then take your yarn around the back and down through the middle, then pivoting and pulling very slowly your right needle until you've caught this yarn through the stitch, and then pull that entire stitch off. I'll do that again from a slightly different view. So wrap your yarn around anti-clockwise and then pull it through, and then I'll show you from the back this time. So you just pull that entire stitch off the left needle. So up through, right needle behind the left needle, around the back anti-clockwise, pivot and pull down your right needle, making sure that you catch both strands as well. That is a common error when knitting with 2 strands, and then pull the entire stitch off your needle. Again, through the stitch nearest the end of the needle, wrap the yarn around the back anti-clockwise, pivot and pull down your right needle, and then pull that stitch off the needle. Okay, I'll do the last few at a more normal speed. And again, don't forget you can pause and rewind or slow this video down if you want to see it in slow-mo. Keep going until you reach the end of your row, and then we've got the last stitch. So you do the exact same thing. You go up through the stitch, around the back, down through the middle, and then pivot and pull and take that entire stitch off your needle. So you've now transferred all your stitches from your left needle to your right needle. And then to continue with the second row, you just go into this entry point and carry on. So instead of doing more knit stitches, I'm going to show you how to purl stitch now. So at this point, you want to make sure that you don't mix in your short ends, keep those out of the way. The main difference with purl stitch is that you're going through the front of the stitch. So for knit stitch, we go up through the back like this. Purl stitch, we come down and go through the front and cross over. The other main difference, for knit stitch, we go through the back, but our working yarn also goes behind. Whereas for purl stitch, we go through the front and our working yarn stays in front. So that's the two main differences for purl stitch. So let's begin. So we want to go down into our first stitch in front and then have the crossover. And again, keep hold of both needles with one hand if you can, so you can use your right hand to control your yarn. And we're going to go anti-clockwise around that needle, and then we're going to pivot and push back, so we do the same thing but through the back, and then we take that whole stitch off. I'll show you that a few more times. So we go down through the first stitch, then taking our working yarn, we go around the needle, and then we're going to pivot and push backwards and take that whole stitch off. Again, we go down through the front, take our working yarn, wrap it around the needle, and then we're going to push and pivot back like that. So don't forget, you can stop, rewind, pause, watch in slow-mo, however many times you need to get the hang of this, until you have got it and it becomes muscle memory. So another thing to mention, when you're switching between knit stitch and purl stitch, you need to make sure that your yarn is in the right place. So if we were to do a knit stitch now, we'd need to move our working yarn behind and go in the back. Whereas if we're doing a purl stitch, the working yarn stays in front and our needle goes in front like this. And then carry on until you reach the end of your row. Last stitch. And pull that off, and there you go. So that is how to cast on, knit stitch and purl stitch with 2 strands. I hope that's been helpful and you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.